courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC podcast, episode number 336. Andrew with you once again. I am Andrew on the forums, or Andrew in the forums rather, and I am Andrew NLSC on Twitter. Got to keep that branding going. My co-host is Derek, also known as D43 in the forum, and D4384 on Twitter.
Yeah, happy to be here again. In the middle of a 2-week vacation, so this is awesome. And I have all these ideas and of stuff to do and projects to work on and everything, so keeping busy. But I think this is the longest vacation from work that I've taken in possibly a decade.
That's that's not too bad, having a couple of weeks off here and there. You've been working from home, haven't you?
Yeah, that's true too. So I've been working from home, I believe, since March 15th. And there's no return to work in sight. I do work at a big office. It's an office job, but basically there's no set timetable for us to go back, and this could drag on, as you know, for quite a while longer.
Months, yeah. On the plus side, you're right there in the reach of basketball video games and basketball on Twitter and DVD and everything else, or indeed VHS if you want to break out the old VCR.
Yeah, I actually don't have a VCR anymore. So I should probably pick one up though, because that's incredibly old school. I made a video for Twitter. I think some people have already seen it, of some now bloopers from the now NBA I put them to I picked some highlights and put them to a black and white background with some vigneting and with some old movie scratches and stuff like that, effects, and posted some highlights, and I think people like it right now. But they have the Movavi Video Suite. What I use is they have like a VHS feature, like an effect feature. But like when a VHS didn't work well,
tracking,
and the tracking, VHS tracking, that's what the effect looks like. So I couldn't really use it for the highlights. But yeah, it's cool. I love stuff like that.
I enjoyed it because it's. It highlights a point that we've talked about as far as the real NBA is concerned, and you can go back and listen to some of our comments about that, and of course with your upcoming podcast, Holding Court, which I shall be guesting on at least once, if you'll have me, as we've said before, that we'll be talking about things like that. But before we get into basketball video games this week, on the subject of the real NBA, wanted to point out it's the end of an era with the Spurs missing the playoffs for the first time since 1997. ESPN's social media put out an infographic showing how the world has changed since then, and since the last time the Spurs were out of the playoffs. And it's quite a long run.
And the only reason they missed the playoffs in 1997 is because David Robinson was out the entire season. So that's the year that in 96-97 where they made kind of a last-ditch effort to, keep fans entertained and engaged that season without their best player, and they signed Dominique Wilkins. And, when it was all said and done, Dominique Wilkins had a really great season for the Spurs. It's hard to believe that he was around 36 years old. And he was playing, I think, 36 or 37 years old, and he was playing at such a high level, considering his injury history and whatnot. But yeah, it's pretty wild. Obviously, history shows that the next year they got Tim Duncan, and David Robinson came back fresh, and they were back in the playoffs for 97, 98. But yeah, think about the teams that they've had over the last 20 plus years. The Tony Parker, Ginobili, David Robinson, Tim Duncan, the Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Ginobili teams. And then they got LaMarcus Aldridge and DeRozan later, and they made a couple playoff appearances and all of that. They just had some, and obviously Greg Popovich. They just had so many great teams over the years.
And you talk about a what if, obviously with that injury to David Robinson and Sean Elliott, and I think Chuck Person might have missed most or if not all of that year as well as a gunner off the bench. If they don't miss the playoffs that year, if they don't get in the lottery and win the lottery and get Tim Duncan, first of all, maybe your Celtics would have got Tim Duncan, which would be quite nice for them. But if the Spurs don't get him, do they win a few championships? Do they get over the hump as they did in '99 when the Bulls fell apart, when their dynasty ended? Do they keep Greg Popovich on all those years? Does he get the chance to rebuild the team? For want of a nail, history could have been very different if they didn't actually have the injury. The injuries in '97 and getting into the lottery, of course, jump-started this 22-year run, and being able to stay on top and rebuild and revamp the team as players like Duncan would take a back seat, and new players would come in, and Parker first, and then Kawhi Leonard obviously for a few years there. So it's one of those things again that a what if scenario if they don't get injured, if they're not riddled by injuries, I should say, if Robinson doesn't get injured and Sean Elliott and so forth, maybe they don't have this 22-year run, and certainly not a 22-year run with all these 50-win seasons and 5 titles and a contender all these times. So it's quite an interesting what if.
Well, people rag on Robinson, and it's kind of ridiculous, and I think it's kind of ignorant, to be completely honest with you. Before he went down with that injury, the Spurs were 50, 60 win teams every single season.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
With him as the best player, with a pretty poor supporting cast. Never had a deep bench. Never had an Sean Elliott was always a second best other than 94, 95, where you could argue that Dennis Rodman was. But David Robinson, unfortunately, during those years in the early 90s, had to go against Hakeem Olajuwon at his best. He had to go against, Charles Barkley at his best. And he had to go against, Shaq, young Shaq. And then he had to go against Patrick Ewing at his best. So what happened was when the Spurs did start winning championships, the centers were going downhill, if you remember correctly.
Absolutely.
They won 98, 99. Some of the centers were on their way out. We were closing in on Toronto Raptors Hakeem. Patrick Ewing was on his way out and whatnot. And he had a big role on those 2 championship teams that the Spurs won when he came back, especially in 98, 99. And then, in the early 90s, again, he was producing 50, 60 win teams, and they were a legit contender even with poor supporting casts and non-deep benches and whatnot. So to talk about David Robinson as less of a player, or to, talk poorly about him with not mentioning the context around the situations is just, it's kind of ignorant in my opinion. It kind of bugs me, to be honest with you.
It's one of those things where it's become the accepted narrative, but it's just based on just what somebody has come up with at one point, much like the whole Vince Carter's injured narrative, or that he's soft and easily injured, when he had a couple of injury-plagued seasons, and the rest of his way he was quite durable, in fact. But the other thing I want to point out about the Spurs' longevity as a contender and whatnot, I saw somebody commented on a Facebook post, and they said it wasn't very impressive because half the NBA makes the playoffs every year. I see that argument, I see the point, but I disagree quite vehemently with that, because yes, half the league does make the playoffs, but if it was that easy to be in the playoffs 22 years in a row, we would see more teams doing it. That we can't discount the fact that they were able to stay on top and put together teams and rebuild and retool over the years, and the longevity of the players. It's still very impressive, and yes, they do benefit as from having half the league in the playoffs every year, but so do the other 29 teams, and yet they're the ones who have the big streak. So I think that's quite myopic to say.
I also think it's lacking context again. He's the person who's saying this isn't thinking about what West the Spurs were playing in. If you go back and look at how tough the West was since, let's say, 97, 98, and especially through the 2000s, and you and I have talked about this before, and I've talked about it on Twitter and other platforms at length. The West was winning 55 to 60% of the games every single year. The West was dominant. Right. So, I mean, they were playing against really tough competition in the Western Conference, and they were playing, obviously, as you know, they play the Western Conference more during the regular season. I think that makes the feat even more impressive, that they were battling through, again, a tougher Western Conference and, with tougher opponents than what the East had, all the way up until, basically through the entire 2000s and 2010s. And they were still able to make it into the postseason every single season. So again, it's missing context. And like you said, between injuries, between maybe personnel changes and player changes, and something as simple as having George Hill and then not having George Hill, etc. They had to have great coaching, great playing, make players adapt, overcome injuries, a good front office, all of that stuff in order to be able to make the playoffs every single season.
Exactly. So it's kind of a shame to see, but all good things come to an end, as the saying goes. But just something I did want to bring up because it's they have been one of the best teams for over 20 years. Almost a quarter of a century to have that kind of relevance is pretty rare in the NBA when we've seen the ups and downs of other teams. And you look at the way things have changed in that time. We've gone from to bring it back to a basketball gaming perspective, we've gone from NBA Live being the dominant brand in the late 90s when they were starting to put together the early championship runs, and of course the championship in '99, and we've to a point where we've got NBA 2K as a dominant brand, and in fact the only brand. And of course we have the gameplay blog to talk about this week, the developer blog, and it's kind of what we expected of current gen, actually.
Yeah, and a little unexpected. But like I said, I was pretty excited about the idea of, what they said, we're going to try to make the game more fun and, a better balance of fun and realism and whatnot. And then I see the new layup information and the whole use of the right stick, turn it, counterclockwise or to 6 o'clock or whatever to, execute this layup. And the stuff that they're trying to do, layups are already hard in the game, and the biggest reason they're hard is because of the two-man animations and the being dragged backwards or forwards into a defender, and you miss more layups than you should. It makes it almost impossible to time it, etc. And now they add another layer onto layups, and it was pretty frustrating to see. And I kind of called it out on Twitter as well, and said something to Mike Wang under his post. He didn't respond to me, but the game already has these issues that a lot of people wanted to be addressed, and your tweet about gameplay revolves around another layer to layups, and it bothered me. I think it bothered you a little bit as well.
It did, and we'll get into that as we break down the current gen gameplay blog. No time like the present, of course. The one thing that he at the top of the blog that Beluba reiterated was that focus on striking the good balance between realism and fun. Once again referred to the turnovers on long passes as an example of what they wanted to avoid, and reiterated the stance from the earlier comments on NBA 2K TV. But yeah, certainly looking at some of the changes, you do have to wonder if that is going to be the case. Something that is noteworthy is Damian Lillard had several suggestions for the game. He is the current gen cover player, of course. One of them was raising the maximum height for point guards in my career to 6'8", kind of like the Anthony Hardaway, Magic Johnson. Of course, Magic Johnson was 6'9". Those taller point guards builds, which is a good idea. I think it's obviously realistic. We do see those oversized point guards, Derek, but at the same time, the balance in the online arena and in my career, that's what concerns me. That's what I've said in the forum, is that yes, it's fine to have those 6'8" players, but if they don't have balanced builds otherwise with badges and ratings and whatnot, it's I can just see that being a disaster online.
And you can also see that what would happen is the majority of people are going to create a tall point guard.
Well, they make 7'3" centers. I mean, online is full of all these 7'3" beastly centers. So of course people are going to take that natural advantage, especially with the way the physics work with elbow blocks and arse blocks and all kinds of things like that. They're going to take the big players, yeah.
Yeah, and so basically that's what's going to end up happening is everybody's, and we talked about this on the past podcast too, is they're going to all be, this is the best point guard build, and it's going to be 6'7", 6'8" point guards, and then everybody's going to be like, I want that build, and everybody gets the same build. That's and I've heard that happens a lot, like you had just mentioned with 7'3" centers. So who's going to want to make a 6-foot guard when you can get a 6'7", 6'7" or 6'8" guard who can do all of the things your 6-foot guard can do?
Exactly, and it does lead to that very homogenized experience. I've talked about this in articles on the podcast before, and as you just mentioned, it all comes down to what is that OP build? What is that build that people want to have with the jump shot people want to have, that you have to succeed online? And it leads to, again, that very homogenized, standardized experience, because if you deviate from that template, it's putting you at such a disadvantage that online isn't fun, and yet it doesn't become fun because everyone's playing the same way, so it becomes a vicious cycle.
What they need to do is find a balance. If they're going to allow 6'7", 6'8" point guards, make it so certain ratings only have a cap level of, let's say your speed and quickness can't be quite as good as 6'1", right?
Oh,
so
they do that. They do that. They do that already.
Yeah.
But it's not well balanced. Yeah, it's not well balanced.
Right. Exactly. That's the point. They have to do it in a way that alters the person's mindset to say, you know what? I do want a JJ Barea type. You know what I mean? I want somebody who's going to be quicker rounding corners, or who's going to be able to do this and that. And, you know, maybe they want a Trae Young type. I wouldn't. But maybe they want a Trae Young type as opposed to a Ben Simmons type. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, not that Ben Simmons should really be playing point guard, but you get the point. So I think that the biggest problem that I have with it is there's so much stock being put into, you know, the OP build, the best build, and all of that stuff, that I think people forget that they're playing basketball. I know that sounds ridiculous, but there's so much stock into building your player and getting the tallest player and all of that stuff that there's not a lot of talk about basketball. It's just trying to be like the most dominant.
Metagaming.
Does that make...
it comes down to, it sort of reduces it to that RPG build that you've talked about before, the RPG mechanics in a basketball game. And my career is kind of an RPG-based mode, but when it comes to this online, it really has come down to the metagaming, that you have to have that, again, that OP build. And it does need to be balanced. As you said, it's whether it drops the speed a little bit, which it does, again, as I said, but not enough. That you need to have those real advantage that really stands out. And it's too easy for the shorter players to get the ball knocked away by taller players. Those shorter players should be able to handle the ball a lot better, to be able to protect the ball a lot better because they're lower to the ground. Little things like that you have the advantage of the tall players, but not the advantage of the short players with things like that. It's not very well represented with the current mechanics. Who knows what it's going to be like on next gen? Not really holding my breath. But when it comes down to it, the bottom line of changes like this, and even if this change wasn't made, is that the builds are not balanced. And that's why online is, as I said in the Friday 5, kind of a mess right now.
Well, you know, the other thing, too, is this is also the problem with my team. It's the same exact problem with my team. It's where, you know, they'll release a version of Kristaps Porzingis that runs like a point guard, you know, as quick as a point guard, has like a 99 vertical, a 99 three-pointer, a 99 this, a 99 that. And then you're on my team and you're like, wait a minute, you know, everybody's putting together the same type of teams and everybody's overpowered, and I can throw up threes with, you know, with this guy who's with Yao Ming or Shaq and all of that stuff, like it's a layup, and, you know, I'm out here playing with them like I'm Curry. And what happens is it creates this unrealistic, and remember, this is my point with the whole thing. They're not thinking about basketball, like it's not representing basketball properly and all of that stuff. It's just this ridiculously arcade experience. And by the way, when I watch my team gameplay and I watch people playing online, like whether it's Troyden or, you know, somebody else playing online and they're streaming or just looking up a YouTube video, it looks very similar. Is there any structure to that gameplay?
No.
Is there any basketball things going on most of the time? So, you know, the same problems that are in online play and, you know, building your character and all of that stuff and the way that's done is the same problems in my team. And we talked about them moving more in an arcade direction and getting away from real basketball. And it's just, it looks like they're going to continue down that path, and that's pretty damn unfortunate.
It is, and even if you want to say that we're being too precious about the simulation aspects and the realism and whatnot, if you want to look at it from a fun point of view or a strategic point of view, even if you're looking at just gameplay strategy rather than, or video game strategy rather than basketball strategy, if all the players play the same, there's no point really collecting any specific player. You're just collecting specific cards. The player that's on them is immaterial. If you've got the Galaxy Opals, you've got pink diamonds, 97 overall Ryan Hollins, which is just ridiculous. I pulled that one from the pack and I tweeted out, and so I said on Twitter, I'm looking forward to never using this card. Not one of my favorite players, Ryan Hollins. No disrespect, some disrespect. But why bother having 98 overall pink diamond Michael Jordan if you've got a pink diamond Ryan Hollins who can do it all as well. I mean, I know there is a point. I prefer one to the other, but as far from a mechanical standpoint, from a gameplay standpoint, if that Ryan Hollins plays, to put a more direct comparison, a Shaq, a pink diamond Shaq. Why have a pink diamond Shaq when a pink diamond Ryan Hollins will be just as dominant and play just like him?
Andrew,
Yeah.
put the real name behind him. Don't tell me that I'm using Shaquille O'Neal, and don't put the real name behind him and his real face, and tell me that I can use him like Curry. That's misrepresentation, right? And that also ruins the entire skill gap in the integrity of competition.
It does.
If you want to make a game, and you want to give me that type of experience, give me fake players. Give me just Carlos Danger, Joey Malcolm, give me these John Smith, give me these fake names, and give me 99 on everything, and it won't feel as bad, right? You're like, oh, I know what I'm getting into. Like, this game doesn't have the NBA license, and it's not based off of these real players. But don't tell me that, hey, here's the 2000, 2001 Shaquille O'Neal, but yeah, you can use him like Steph Curry.
Yeah,
here you go. Here, I see he's in the Lakers uniform there and everything, and he's built like Shaq, but here you can use him like Steph Curry. That is absolutely ridiculous, and I think it's a big problem because I think some people, and this is crazy, but I think you would agree, some people put stock in this, and they relate it to real life.
Oh, yeah.
I really believe that.
Yeah.
Well, these kids, when they listen to the commentary on the games, they take it seriously. We've talked about this before. When they use these players a certain way in the video game or the way that they're representative, they put stock in that, and it makes them think about the players differently. It hurts the game of basketball. I really believe that.
It does, but and here's the thing, even if you want to put all of that aside and just focus on the pure gameplay experience, from the results from doing this, it's pointless to collect different players. If you need a three-point shooter for your team, it's pointless to collect a Stephen Curry or a Klay Thompson or historically a Mark Price or a Craig Hodges or something like that. There's no point getting it when, again, you can get a Shaq that can do it just as well. And with the added bonus of overpowering everybody in the inside as well. So it becomes pointless to actually strategically build your team with specific players. So it just makes it pointless. The out of position cards have made it pointless. We talked about that before, in fact, that goes against something that they said in the My Team blog last year, that they were trying to get rid of that cheese where people could just put Giannis at point guard and dominate and things like that, and play these players out of position. And then they released the out of position packs, not one but two sets of them. It just, at some point every year, My Team just goes crazy. People know that it's a well documented problem. Some people enjoy it, and look, I'm not going to tell people that they're enjoying it wrong, but since they're doing it, if you can get enjoyment out of it, more power to you. But I do think it goes against the concept of the mode, and yes, whether it all comes down to balance in gameplay, and that is what's lacking. And especially, I can't imagine taking My Team online, especially with people paying thousands of dollars for packs to get all these stacked teams with players that can be superpowered. It would be a very frustrating experience, I believe.
Well, that's the other thing. We talked about this, buying your way to success, right? Some people don't have the money and they're automatically at a disadvantage. And this goes for online. This goes for My Team, and this goes for your career and playing in the park and all of that stuff. The integrity of competition is automatically compromised because you could be a way better player than somebody else, but what they did was they bought their way to success, and you are going to miss shots that you shouldn't miss, that are better shots than the tool who's taking a 35-foot three with a guy that he didn't deserve to get, and he's smoking threes on you, right? Contested. All of that stuff. So I think the integrity of competition has already been cooked, in my opinion, as far as playing online in My Team and all of that stuff. And as you know, I'm very. I think it's sport. Competition is important. Skill gap is important. Grinding your way to everybody being on the same level playing field as far as how much time they need to spend in the game and all of that stuff. All of that is incredibly important to me. So as you know, that's why I stay away from those modes. My brother and I, and my brothers and I, we play offline, and we're on an even playing field, and we use the players, and we've talked about this, to their strengths, and, and whatnot, and that's fun for us. That's good. That's competition. That's the sport. So yeah, I stay away from those modes. I don't know how you do it, and I know that you complain more than you praise it. So,
which is that is the funny thing is why do I do it when I have the complaints? It is kind of addictive. I have enjoyed when it's good, it's very addictive and very fun. But when it's bad, and when you can see how fun it should be, and that's I think my constant complaint with online is that the modes are great as far as the concepts. Conceptually they are very fun modes, and they should be a lot more fun than they are. And that's the frustrating thing. And I think sometimes the frustration actually drives, you're playing it to as mad as that sounds, because you're kind of like, well, I've put in the time. I want to see if I can have a good experience with it. But to that point, it's one of those reasons, one of the main reasons that I will always push back on the it's optional to pay model. The argument, rather, that it's optional. Because, yes, it is. And Jim Sterling, again, that we've referred to many times, has pushed back on this as well, and I completely agree. It's optional in that you don't have to, but as far as being able to keep up with the competitive balance, because the competitive balance is set by the people who are paying for that day one upgrade, or they're getting the special edition, so they've got all the packs at the beginning, or all the VC to buy packs, or upgrade their player automatically. So that's setting the competitive balance, because they're the ones that have all the powerful players, or the overpowered my player avatar. So yeah, you don't have to, but the alternative is to grind really hard or be at such a disadvantage to. And that's what it's how it's designed. It's designed to take advantage of that. It's designed to take advantage of FOMO, fear of missing out, if you don't get the latest cosmetic items or the new and all the new cards that are coming through, like the goat packs that have come through at the moment. So it is all designed to certainly push you in the direction of spending money, and if you don't, then you may not have the optimal experience. And that's why I push back on the whole idea of it being optional, because it is, but it kind of isn't. Or it is, but you're going to suffer if you don't.
People are pressured and their emotions are played with.
Yeah, exactly.
Period. That's what it is. I mean, there's no other way to put it. And it's all under the guise of, this is such a great mode, you know what I mean? Like, this is for you. This is the mode for you, and this is for the gamer, and we give you all these options and all of that stuff. And but again, it comes down to pressure and truly an attack on people's emotions. And people may think that's dramatic, but you have to understand that these are kids. These are kids playing this, young teens, sometimes younger, kids that are asking their parents for money, using their parents' credit cards, kids that are using the little money that they have in order to, upgrade their player or get something in my team or whatnot. This is, or even young adults, college kids, and all of that stuff. And like we had talked about, the lengths kids will go to avoid FOMO, right? To avoid the fear of missing out is unbelievable. We talked about Madden packs. We talked about people spending thousands of dollars on Madden Ultimate Team.
Well, it also preys on addicts as well, because a lot of gambling addicts will try and replace that dopamine rush with video games, but now the video games are coming after that as well, because you open a pack and the flashing lights and the pack rips open, and if you get a pink diamond card, if you get one of the high cards, it comes out and it's shaking around and flashing, and then it's got a nice sequence when you open up a diamond card or higher, where it comes up and camera zooming around and showing the logo and things like that. All stuff that is meant to trigger that dopamine rush. And I've felt it myself. You're like, oh, this is really cool to actually see this. But you also know that they're doing that because then you say, well, I want some more of this. I want to get this rush again. And so you buy more packs, or I don't, but people do.
Right.
So,
and kids don't think about that. That's the thing. And like you said, the flashing lights and the turning packs and all of that stuff is by design. That's been well researched.
Yeah.
And it's messaging in the front of your brain, and then it's also messaging that gets it's subliminal messaging as well, and it gives you that rush like you're talking about. And people, and these kids don't know it, and these parents don't know it either, right? So we talk about the demographic that's playing these games and stuff. A lot of these kids live at home and whatnot. Do you think that parents know where all their kids' money's going? And do you think that parents know that these games are preying on their kids?
Not at
Do you
all.
think that parents
Well,
actually know?
oh, it's okay now because they've got mild warnings about mild gambling on the front of the cover now. That'll fix it.
No, I mean, to be completely honest with you, the ESRB warnings and whatnot, the warnings in game or out of game or anything like that. The bottom line is that kids are going to do it and the mechanics are going to work on them, and parents are still going to be oblivious and, oh, it's just a basketball game, right? That's what they look at it as. Hey, it's just an NBA game. It's just a basketball game. They could be playing much worse. They could be playing Call of Duty. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
But they don't see, what they just it being a basketball game doesn't make those mechanics okay, and it doesn't make them even safe for children or their mindsets or their pockets. So,
well, people know about violence, nudity, other content that they may find objectionable in all kinds of media, including video games, but that interactive nature of games and the whole idea of that in-game gambling and microtransactions and recurrent revenue, that kind of stuff, it's still not really being explained very well to parents and so forth. And yeah, people will know that if this game has blood and gore or things like that, or nudity and sex scenes or whatever, as some games do these days, but the whole idea of gambling mechanics and that kind of thing, and the vague warnings that the ESRB have come out with, it's not really affecting that. But yeah, that is why I push back on that, because it's optional in quotation marks, basically. But
there's a couple of things. Parents, real quick. Parents, two things. Parents are busy. Okay, a lot of times we talked about this before. Parents are busy. Some working 2 jobs. Parents don't want to deal with anything else in their life, like another stressor, right? So to give their kid a basketball game, here you go, play it. It's basketball. Enjoy the game and all that stuff. The other part of this is parents grew up on video games now. Like the parents that are the parents of kids now, grew up playing PlayStation 2, some PlayStation 3 and stuff like that. And they are, their thought process on video games may be different than the thought process of parents in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So I think that the timing couldn't be worse in this aspect for parents, for not understanding what's going on really, because they grew up with video games. Now their kids are growing up with video games, and it's just accepted.
It has become normalized. This recurrent revenue mechanics and gambling mechanics are just expected of AAA titles, a freemium economy expected, and there is pushback and there's criticism, but it's also very successful. We've talked about boycotts before, and I'm sure we'll talk about boycotts again as we mention more details that have come out through this gameplay blog, that a lot of people will say, I'm never buying again, but they do. And we've talked about how we're part of the problem as well, because we buy every year as well. So it's harder to quit these games than one might think.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and it becomes addicting. And it's the only basketball game in the space. And we talked about this. Reddit. There was a thread on that. There's a thread on Operation Sports about it. There's only one option, and if you want to play virtual hoops with updated rosters, you got to get the new game. And hey, if you want to play with your buddies, this is local play isn't what it used to be, and here you go. You got to go online and put on a headset and all of that stuff. So all of it, I wish there were more options. We've talked about this. I just wish there were more options for people.
So with the gameplay blog, breaking this down further, they've changed the Pro Stick controls this year. I was a bit surprised to hear that they've actually made as many changes as they have, as from what they've been describing with the Pro Stick controls, because it is getting towards the end of the generation. Obviously, we touched before in previous episodes how many games we think are going to continue to come out on the PS4 and X1, and we think that maybe this won't be the last, but maybe it'll be one of the last. And once again, I think we said it last week as well, it seems unlikely that they're going to go much further than this year, compared to the last generation where they continued up until 2K18 coming out on PS3, which is a long time to support that previous generation. For them to make a big change, I guess they kind of did in 2K14, but they'd already done right stick dribbling the year before, so it was inevitable that they were going to adopt right stick dribbling They held out on it with the old isomotion for as long as they could before going the NBA Live route with it. But yeah, they've made some significant changes, Derek, to the Pro Stick, and I was, and we'll get into it in a moment. But it's kind of surprising, and some of them are definitely controversial or potentially controversial.
Yeah, I'm not happy about it. I got to be honest. We'll see how it plays out. But my gut reaction is it isn't good, and I think you felt the same way. And we talked about how if there's a lot of complaints when the game's released, for the first couple of weeks and whatnot, they may buff it or patch it out completely. It made sense to have a system where if you drive right and you push the joystick right, you can finish with your right hand on the right side. If you drive left, you can finish with your left hand on the left side by pushing the joystick to the left. But now adding a layer already on a system that's, and I mentioned this at the onset of the podcast, adding a layer onto layups that, in my opinion, doesn't need to be there because layups are already so complicated because of the two-man animations, all of that stuff with the constant misses at the rim and everything is absolutely ridiculous. And now they've talked about going back to shot aiming, but a different twist on shot aiming. And, how is that going to work with absolute and camera relative? Like, how are we going to make that work? Is it going to be a sound feel? Like, is it going to feel right? And is it going to, how does it feel when you do the shoot button, right? So for those who still want to be able to have that simple, control, are you nerfed if you use the shoot button? Like, are you penalized? You know what I mean? Like, how are they, why are they adding all of these layers onto a game that's already over animated and over complicated and that already has issues with gameplay because of that? Because it's over animated and over complicated.
And I think you've also got to look at the consistency that they've been able to have over the past few games. Even with the switch-in engine, they've been able to keep the controls pretty consistent for the last 4 or 5 years, which has been pretty good because for a while there was something new to learn every year, which added to the learning curve, which is not always a bad thing, but at the same time, if you have to learn these new mechanics year after year, there's something to be said about getting it right and getting something consistent and having a familiar experience that you can pick up and play. And they've gone away from that to change these Pro Stick controls. And to that point, you bring up camera relative and absolute. I'm looking at what they've changed with the Pro Stick, and of course this suits me because I prefer absolute, and whereas your camera relative. But from what it sounds like, will it even work with camera relative? That's a great point, which I hadn't thought of because again I prefer absolute, but that is a valid concern. So the changes that they've made, hold down for a jump shot, hold left or right for escape dribbles, hold up for signature size-ups, tap for quick one-to-one dribble moves, and tap while holding sprint for quick momentum dribbles. So it's a similar system. But you know what I noticed right there? How do you do a bank shot? Because that used to be holding up on the shot stick, on the Pro Stick. Is that gone now?
Yeah, exactly. There's just too many variables. And then that made sense, right? I want people to think about, go back to NBA 2K16, okay? So NBA 2K16 had it where you drive baseline and you push the joystick towards the out-of-bounds line, and what do? You execute a reverse layup. If you want to attack the front of the rim from the baseline, you push the joystick right, and they'll attack the front of the rim. If you want to, if you're dribbling down the court on the fast break, and you want to finish with your right hand, you flip it to the right. Flip it to the left. You want to finish on the left side, you flip it to the left. And remember, this is depending on camera view. And if you want to do a bank shot, you push up on the joystick or whatnot. And, if you want to execute a shimmy fade, you push the joystick out away from the body, and you can do like a shimmy fade or whatnot. It made sense. And you also had 4 size-ups. You want to do a size-up to the right, you flick the left stick while you're dribbling to the left side, to the right, and they'll do their right size up, and you can burst off of it. And it added a sense of authenticity. The controls made sense, right? And if you remember correctly, when people talk about NBA 2K16, how do they talk about the gameplay? Awesome, right?
Yeah.
People talk about NBA 2K16 incredibly fondly. They also talk talk about 2K15 and 2K17 pretty damn fondly as well. So they're fond of the gameplay. They felt like the game felt good. The controls were tight. The controls made sense and everything. And we've talked about this, and we've talked about what people have said about the gameplay since 2K18. It's been very mixed reviews on the gameplay and issues with layups and issues with feel and all of that stuff. So now they're going to add another layer and make it even more complicated. I don't know how it's all going to work, but I got to be honest with you, I'm not completely optimistic about it.
Some of the concepts sound like they could work in theory. The signature size-ups is something that people wanted to see come back. Apparently there's 14 Street and 36 NBA signature size-up animations to choose from in current gen this year. And holding the stick up, in this case, reminds me a lot of NBA Live 10, and which, of course, Mike Wong did work on. And, of course, I think NBA Live 14 or 15 did it as well, where you'd hold the stick and it would go into the signature size-up animation. So it's an idea that has been done before, and I think people will enjoy it. But again, it's taking away that bank shot. Apparently, there's no mention of the bank shot in that developer blog. I don't know if Beluba has addressed that in his Twitter thread. I'll have to go back and look at that. Do you recall seeing anything about the bank shots?
I didn't see anything about the bank shots. I'd have to look at it again. I didn't see anything about it.
Yeah, so that's a concern right there.
I have a question for you, though. How often do you use the bank shot?
Sometimes in the mid-range. So I suppose in that respect, maybe, because they're talking about telemetry data with the badges. So jumping ahead a bit, they have actually kept the badge system from last year where you can pick different badges for your My Player, and based on the build, again, balance comes into effect there, but they have based it on telemetry data. So they would also have the telemetry data about how many people are using the bank shot, I suppose. So it may be an informed decision in that regard, and we may be worrying over nothing.
Yeah, I use the bank shot from time to time. Like, obviously, if I'm using, like, Tim Duncan, because remember, I use classic teams and whatnot on games and stuff like that, I'll try to use the bank shot more.
Of course, yeah.
Just to play more likeness, because that's his signature thing. But, yeah, I think the badge system was overpowered in 2K20. Yeah. I think the emphasis on badges was overpowering. I think it adversely affected gameplay. I don't think it was good for the overall gameplay. I think what they were trying to do with that is trying to help the skill gap, but I don't think they did. So a less emphasis on badges would actually be nice, in my opinion.
It's funny because they talk about the skill gap with the badges, and they have their role. They do represent those special abilities, much like Freestyle Superstars did back in the day, actually. So I see the point of them, and I'm not saying to get rid of the badges. But the funny thing is, things like Pogo and Intimidator online are very unbalanced. Having played with a big man build online in recent months, the ability to, the way I'm able to adjust, alter shots in the paint when I'm just in the vicinity with the hands up, and I can see the Intimidator badge pop up, and it can do it offline as well, but online is where I've noticed it the most. I forced so many shots that I'm sure have really frustrated opponents, and because it's also happened to me when I was a small player going against a big, or even when I'm a big player going against another big man going against another big man. It's just very overpowered that you don't even have to really be in position. You can be behind a player, and I know the whole idea of a defender bearing down on you is a thing, but it's so overpowered that you really don't have to make much of an effort to challenge shots. You just have to be in the vicinity. If they take a shot and they get fouled and the ball's in the air and you go and you just come into the area and put the hands up, you can force the miss after the fact and save the and one because the Intimidator badge comes up after the foul. It's very unbalanced. So that's the kind of thing that they need to address. One thing that they have addressed that I think is a great idea is they've gotten rid of the quick draw badge and they've moved the speed of the shot animations back to the jump shot creator, back to the animation system. Again, I don't think... Well, I see why they did it last year. Again, they wanted to make it skill-based and everything, but I think it was absolutely the wrong move. So the fact that they've taken that away within a year is a good move, a great move, in fact.
I just want shooting to feel right.
Yeah.
I want the mechanics to work. I want the animation to be smooth. I want the ability to go up with because remember, I play user timing with the meter off. I want the ability to go up for a shot with a player and know that, the animation to not be rushed. Like I want it to be a smooth shooting animation. And I think you and I can both agree that the shooting mechanics, and a lot of people have talked about this on Twitter as well, the shooting mechanics in general, regardless of the animation that you had attached to a player or not, whether you're playing online or offline, was far superior in games like 2K16 and 2K17.
It was,
with
yeah.
the old motion system. Yeah, it just felt better to shoot, and I think that's very important, the feel.
And a lot of the badges are, again, for shooting and defense, are very much bailouts. They're overpowered, as the case may be, not properly balanced. So it all comes down to that, and that's why online is in the state it is, and offline too, but online because people are really loading up on those badges. In theory, the offline gameplay, also you can change it. You can go into Edit Player and start removing some badges or upgrade or downgrade the badges for players, as the case may be. Online, you are facing these OP builds, and that's where the balance really comes into play. Signature size ups, as I said, 14 street, 36 NBA animations. They're saying that moves are now more responsive and chainable. Street moves are performed with the tap of the left trigger. So they've made some more changes, again, to that Pro Stick and the controls. Kind of controversial to do that towards the end of the generation. Things like being more responsive sound great in theory, but we've heard these things old developer blogs, have we not? And they've not always delivered.
Yeah, I mean, we heard, 2K19, before that came out, we fixed the skating, or the skating is way better. And then you saw it like the foot planning is better. And then you saw it in the IGN review, and then you saw it in the GameSpot review, or whatnot. And then you actually go into the game and they're skating all over the place. Yeah. Like we paid heavy attention to the skating, and we definitely noticed that as an issue. We're going to make it better. And then for 2K18, 2K19, and 2K20, the foot planning is poor. I want to see things like the change of direction being less clunky, it making more sense.
No running in mud.
No running in mud. I want to see, the bursts make sense. I want to see, acceleration, etc. I want to see, the step back make more sense, and not everybody have the same one. I think you probably realize that with 2K20, and some of the listeners have, to pull back with the dribble. You can do the exact same thing with every guard in the league. Yep. Right? It's the same pullback and whatnot. So I want to see not only more authenticity in the gameplay, but it needs to feel better, and the player movement needs to feel better. And like you said, we've heard all of these things before.
I mean, if it's as good as advertised, then it could be a pretty polished final, or one of the final games for the current generation. But again, it's one of those things to take with a grain of salt, because we've heard it before, and we've heard conflicting things from year to year. Things have been hyped up, like the lack of two-man animations in the paint in 2K18 was hyped up as a good thing. That we removed these multi-actor animations, and then the next year we had to do it because there was a problem with the motion system. But you didn't say that the previous year, and you didn't say that the nerfed layups were a band-aid fix for a problem you'd found. And of course you're not going to say that because you're trying to promote the game, but that's the point. You've revealed the deception. They've revealed the secrets. Yeah.
But then 2K20, it's the most two-man animations I think I've ever seen in an NBA 2K.
Yeah. So
we're going to remove them. We're going to remove the double. Then let's say so. Now the most recent game has them, but they don't talk about it.
So we've gone back and forth. They've like a magician revealing his tricks on stage. It's the trick on stage. It's been revealed. The big thing, of course, is shooting. And this is what we've alluded to before. It's the controversial thing on Twitter. Both jump shots and layups will be using this. But I'll read from my summary that I put on the in the forum and on the main page. So when shooting with the Pro Stick, the shot meter is going to be replaced by target aiming, which is inspired by 2K17's mechanics. You're going to, rather than actually being timing the release as opposed to early or late, is going to be getting the sweet spot as far as a target that will pop up on screen. You can use the whole animation to hit that target window. So instead of being a later or early release or a slightly earlier, whatever, it's going to come down to whether you can hit that sweet spot. You can also hit a button to lock it in if you're confident with the shot. So that sounds very contrived to me. I mean, maybe you get used to it. It's something that I'll reserve judgment on until I've had it in my hands and feel like it. But it sounds to me like they've tried to address some problems with timing and whatnot, but they've just made it more contrived and possibly even easier for players to hit greens once you know the animation. So I don't think that's going to balance anything at all.
I have a big problem with them saying 2K17 inspired. because 2K17 had amazing shooting, and it doesn't sound like it's lining up with what NBA 2K17 had.
No.
My brothers and I, the control on the shooting might be the best in 2K17. The feel of the shooting, the feel of doing off-balance shots, the feel of executing a fadeaway, and all of that stuff. Them saying 2K17 inspired sounds good when you say 2K17 inspired, but the description of it doesn't sound like it matches up. So that actually kind of bothers me a little bit.
And then you look at layups where they're talking about you start the layup by moving, say, right if you want to go right with the layup, but then doing the 12 o'clock rotation to go to the sweet spot. Again, sounds more contrived to me than maybe that's the skill gap, but it just doesn't sound like the right approach to me.
Well, somebody and I said this to you before the call, before we started the show. Somebody retweeted after Mike Wang talked about this, and he goes, "It's an effing layup." Jesus Christ. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's a layup. It's a damn layup.
The easiest shot in basketball.
Stop. Yeah. Right, exactly. Like why do this? And again, they're talking about the blend of fun and realism and all of that stuff. Why are you doing, like, how does that go along with the fun factor, with or even the realism factor? How do you think that's actually going to be executed by people?
Yeah.
How many people do you think are going to actually do that and turn it clockwise or whatever, turn it to 12 o'clock or anything like that? I'm not looking forward to that feature. I'm going to hold full judgment until I actually get my hands on the sticks. As I've said, I've already pre-ordered the game and whatnot, like I do every year because, we're part of the problem, as you know. But yeah, I'm holding full judgment, but I don't like the sound of it.
And it can be disabled. That should be recognized there. It can be disabled, and if you use the button, it will be the familiar timing approach. So there's still going to be that traditional approach to it, but they've really revamped the Pro Stick across the board from dribbling to the shooting mechanics. And look, maybe it will work out, maybe it won't. There is the option if you don't want to use the stick, or you can go the old school, the previous approach, which is good. They've at least got that going for it. But it does sound quite contrived to me. The idea of having to aim it with the right stick and rotate and get to that sweet spot and then lock it in. Well, you don't have to lock it in, but you can lock it in if you trust that you've hit that sweet spot. Again, so now you're using two buttons to shoot in one shooting motion and everything. It's
The options are key, right? Like the fact that you said, like, options, like the fact that they have them is great. Live missed the boat on that so many times. Like, you don't even have camera relative controls in NBA Live.
Yeah.
Like NBA Live 18, NBA Live 18. At least like 2K gives you those options. So I want to applaud them for that. Same with sliders. They don't all work as intended. They can't fix the game's problems, but you have those options. You have the options to try to, fix things or nerf problems and all of that stuff. But I've said this so many times before that by default, the game needs to be strong. By default, the game needs to be strong.
Out of the box, or first boot, from the first boot.
Right, first boot. Select your difficulty level and go in, because that's what the majority of gamers do. It also greatly helps the first impression, which NBA Live has failed at so miserably over the last, decade plus. So, yeah, I think that it's great to have options, but the game needs to feel great by default.
Also worth noting that it's going to be, they say, much tougher on Hall of Fame, as you would expect, and it's going to be much more forgiving with the timing and the aiming on the easier difficulty levels. So we'll see. But a lot of people, I think, are skeptical in the forum and on Twitter. We mentioned, and you and I. Layups in particular, because they're already problematic in 2K20 where too many layups miss. And people always justify it, and sometimes developers too. They'll tweet out a video of, there's that one of LeBron missing the layup. I think it might have been the one that you used in your, or actually no, it's an earlier one that they used. But they can pull an example like you did with that with that great video you put together and say, hey, look, players miss easy layups. Yes, but it's the frequency and the context and the situations that we miss layups in the game compared to how it misses in real life. And again, that balance between fun and realism, there's just so many competing schools of thought and the way it's implemented and the context and everything. It's I'm hoping for the best, and hopefully the options will at least make it viable again, but I do look at it and I am concerned about that. If it does prove to be unpopular, do you think they'll patch it?
Yes. I think they will. They'll nerf it, and then like we talked about before, people complain about the nerf, and they'll probably bring it right back. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not.
yeah.
I'm not a fan of the patch system, but I do think that if people are loud enough, and influencers even are loud enough, because that's who they care about. It seems like the most sometimes. If people are loud enough, I think that they will try to nerf it or buff it or something like that.
If it turns out to be that much of a bust, I could see them doing it. I could see them patching it and maybe going back to the old system if it's just too much of a blunder. But then again, of course, they'll be focusing on next gen as well. And then this makes me think, what are they going to do for next gen? I mean, if they're doing this on current gen, there are going to be new technologies and new approaches on next gen, but presumably they're going to have familiar controls. I mean, they did with 2K14, and I know that this is supposed to be built from the ground up, but surely they're not going to introduce a brand new system for current gen and then bring a game out 2 months later that's going to have yet another learning curve, yet another motion system, yes, but a control system, control configuration. Surely they wouldn't do that, would they?
I question that too. I was thinking about that based on our prior conversations, is how much is PS5 going to feel like PS4? Like, how much are they going to feel like, are they going to actually do a completely new experience 3 to 4 months after putting this new stuff in place for the PS4 version? I don't know. I know that they're going to want to come out of the gate with something different. I think that it could go either way. I have to be honest, because we talked about this. NBA 2K14 for Xbox One played very similar, and all the mechanics were very similar to NBA 2K14 for the PS4. Like they were, for the PS3, and very similar to 2K13. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that it could go either way. I'm hoping for a new gameplay experience for PS5 version of NBA 2K21, but it's up in the air.
But even if the motion system is different, even if they've changed things with the tech that's hopefully for the better, can you imagine if they introduce this revised dribbling and shooting system for the current gen version and then put out the next gen version, and we have to learn a brand new dribbling system and a new shooting system 2 months, 3 months later? That's insane.
Yeah, but like I said, that's why I think it's up in the air. I think that the new size up thing, I think them putting that in the PS4 version is to prepare people for the PS5 version. To be honest with you, I think that's going to be I
would think so. Yeah.
I think that a lot of that stuff is probably going to make it into the PS5 version because it's a company goal. It's not just like a system goal. You know what I mean? So I think that it could go either way, but I would think that things like the new size ups, some of the new content that we've already talked about, some of the gameplay features and all of that stuff is going to be mimicked, copied for the PS5 version of the game.
They've also mentioned block targeting has been improved. Some of the overpowered paint moves have been toned down, which is nice. I think some of the underpowered paint moves also need to be toned up, as the case may be. Those layups that missed, the easy layups that missed way too easily. Also, there's signature defensive styles this year, similar to some of the signature dribbling styles introduced in 2K20 or brought back in 2K20, as the case may be. And again, they've also made a point of, Beluga has made a point, since he was the one writing the blog, that player movement has been refined for more responsiveness, which again, in theory, if block targeting, Derek, has been improved, and they've adjusted some of those paint moves, if player movement does feel better on the sticks, if they have been able to refine that, that's great news. I'd love to see that. That's been some of the things that we've been talking about. It's addressing some of those concerns that we and others have been so vocal about. But again, it's something that we have to take with a grain of salt, because we have heard this stuff before throughout this generation. We've heard about this great motion system that was introduced in 2K18, allegedly, and how it was fixed in 2K19, allegedly, and how it was addressed in 2K20 again, allegedly. And yet the result sometimes has been improvements. I don't want to say there's been no improvements whatsoever, but there's also been a bit of a letdown, more than a bit of a letdown, as far as the scope of just how much has been improved, or indeed what they've called improvements have not been improvements. So again, it's one of those things that sounds good on paper, and if it's improved in the way that we hope it is, fantastic, and that bodes well for the next gen as well.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that red flags were the most apparent this year for 2K20. I think you would agree.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this. The developers taking breaks the multiple developers taking breaks, the Fix 2K, all hashtag Fix 2K, the videos that went up, including mine, which actually got around 10,000 views, I think, now on YouTube, calling out these issues and stuff like that. Some influencers mentioning them and all of that. I think that this was a red flag year, and I really hope that this is going to be a different experience and that they learn from it. But some of the stuff that I'm hearing, I'm cautious.
And I suppose it is current gen, so how much should we really expect? But you do expect a polished product, kind of the culmination of years of building on the current generation. You kind of expect this to be the definitive game, and maybe it will be, and that will be nice if it is. But again, you just have to take it with so much of a grain of salt, more than a grain of salt sometimes. More than a pinch, a truckload in some cases. But yeah, it sounds good. Again, on paper, it sounds good that refinements to responsiveness and movement, and just trying to feather a player to make a slight movement in 2K20 is so much harder than it was in 18 and 19. I prefer 19's movement, I think, to 18 and 20. As far as the three games that have come out with this motion system on current gen, 19 is the one that felt the best to me. I still prefer. I went back recently and have played some games of 16 and 17, and I absolutely prefer the movement in those games. Don't get me wrong, but as far as the current system, I think 19 kind of got it the best. But there are issues in every one of those games here and there that we can pick on, or pick on. Highlight would probably be a better way of putting it. It's not just something we're nitpicking; they are legitimate issues. And then, of course, things as you brought up, like skating and everything. So, yeah, I want to be optimistic. I don't want to be down on the game, but we have heard these things before, and that's it's hard not to be cynical, hard not to be a bit jaded, because, again, we have heard them before, and we've seen them not come to fruition.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that 2K19 is probably the game that I got the furthest in. So my brother and I probably got 15 to 20 games into a My League with us using separate teams. And if you think about it, that's still a lot of hours of game time. Yep. Actually play time and whatnot. And we started, 2 different seasons on that game, and that's about how far we got. So I'd say that the overall most well-rounded game out of the last 3 is going to be NBA 2K19. I think that 2K20 is probably the most frustrating, even more than 2K18 for me. And I think the biggest reason is because of the lack of control. I think that my biggest problem is the 2-man animations, the change of direction and stuff like that. And that's surprising for me to say that, but, going back and playing 2K18 and the faults that it does have, I have less frustration with 2K18 than I even do with 2K20.
Yeah, so which is surprising after, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll never forget the whole Ronnie 2K thing, and this is marketing 101, where when NBA 2K18 was about to be released, I think we were like a few days before release. He sent out a tweet, the best 2K yet. You know what I mean? Like he goes, the best 2K, and they were pumping up this game like you wouldn't believe, and saying it's the best 2K ever and all of that stuff just to get people to buy it. And then what happened after it was released?
Yeah. Disaster.
So it was a disaster, and people were complaining constantly, and they had to throw a ton of patches at it, and people, and whatnot. So I think the 2K League was a disaster using it, etc. That was the launch of the 2K League. So again, all of those promises, all of that stuff, this is the best 2K yet, the best 2K ever, all of that stuff, and then look what happened. So I'm cautious.
And we will see. Was there anything else about the current gen blog that jumped out to you?
No. I think that the thing that jumped out to me the most was the stick usage, and how much I felt like it contradicted what they were trying to say they were doing with the game. Mm-hmm. I think that was the thing that stood out the most to me. I want to say that it's frustrating to me to see somebody like Mike Wang or the Czar or these developers going on there and talking about things like, hey, you're going to turn the right stick to 12 o'clock, and that's what they're tweeting about. You know what I mean? Mm. Like, that bothers me, because that's what they're tweeting about, and they're not, tweeting about, hey, I know you guys complained about the 2-man animations all year. and this is something that we worked on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, hey, you guys, you complained about it looking like ice hockey. They're not going to say that, but you complained about the foot planning. This is something that we worked on. We addressed this and all of that stuff. Instead, the tweet that comes out is, hey, now you have to turn the, we basically made layups more complicated, and this is how you're going to need to turn the stick and all of that stuff. So I think it's frustrating from a consumer perspective who noticed all of the issues that were with 2K20 in the games of the last 3 years for that to be what they tweet out.
It's suggesting that they've pretty much done all they can with the current gen tech, and that rather than be able to fix those issues, they're kind of introducing new mechanics to perhaps try and make the best of those, make the best of the tech, and maybe hide some of those issues in some cases, like they've tried to do with nerfing the layups in 2K18, things like that. They're trying to put these band-aid fixes on tech that didn't really pan out for these past few games towards the end of the last generation. And maybe we won't get that on next gen because of it's built from the ground up, as they say. But of course, once again, it's still the same company, still the same developers working with that new tech. I mean, we talked about it last week, I believe, that the legacy issues in 2K20, some of them date back to 2K10, 2K11. So we're talking 2 or 3 different engines or iterations of technology and motion systems that are still having those same issues. And if they're persisting across the generations and across the different tech and the different engines, it's not necessarily the tech can't do it, it's the design principles and the philosophy. So that is the concern moving forward onto next gen. And if you look at some of these ideas that at the end of current gen, probably going to start out on next gen. Maybe next gen's not going to really start out on the best footing, but we will see. And of course, to that end, there is a demo coming out on August 24th, 8/24 or 24/8, depending on your date format in the world. Basically, Kobe Day, 8 and 24, and they've put out that promotion for the demo, and it comes with a promotional image of Kobe Bryant, suggesting perhaps that the demo is going to be Kobe-oriented, especially coming out on that date.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense from a marketing perspective. I did want to point something out really quick before we get into the demo.
Sure.
My vision right now, unfortunately, is where it was formerly optimistic. My vision right now for 2K21 for PS5, for some reason, I'm seeing it as clunky. I don't know why. I'm feeling like the gameplay might be clunky, and that's not going to be a good thing. But I just have this vision of it. I don't know what it is. It's a hunch. It's my gut feeling. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm feeling like it's going to be clunky and heavy. But like I said, I could be wrong. So.
I mean, the idea that there's going to be teething problems on a new generation, previous design mistakes repeated with new tech, the tech still being worked on and perfected and really put to good use, it could be the case. And we brought this up when people were disappointed about the PC version being a current gen port, is that may be a bad thing if the next gen turns out to be this revolutionary product, and it would be nice if it was, and then 2K22 can be a next gen port and everything, but it could end up much like 2K14, where it does become that last definitive release on that generation, where we're able to mod it, and it's a fairly solid product because it's built up over all these years, and the new tech isn't quite ready yet. So in the best case scenario, having that current gen port for one more year isn't necessarily the worst thing. And as you know, you brought it up in the forum as well, and I agree, is that those assets, if they are very compatible with the PC version of 2K20, then a lot of those assets can be taken out of 2K21 and put back into 2K20 for the people who are still sticking with 2K20, and also mods from 2K20 brought forward. So there's a lot of advantages, and certainly if the next-gen version isn't quite ready yet, if there are teething problems, then we might actually be getting the better version. Maybe, that is a possibility if it does have that clunkiness.
Exactly. And, that's why I brought that up in there, is because this could be a situation where, first off, I think the NLSC is going to break their own record when this game is released for PC. When 2K21 is released, you're going to have people everywhere coming on to the NLSC, checking out what's going on in that modding section. Do the tools work? Do the courts work? Do the assets work? All of that stuff. So I think you'll break a record like you did recently as far as visitors to the site. Number two, I think that, it could be a situation where, hey, maybe the gameplay is sharper and maybe it is something that I enjoy or you enjoy and, other people enjoy in the community, and they, Peaceman Not comes back. You know what I mean? And maybe more people come back and say, hey, this is the game that we wanted, and they mod the hell out of it, and it gives some, the community some memorable mods.
Well, look at 2K14, the staying power that it has. You've still got Sko Adam and Slim44 making UR Basketball, the URB mod, for 13 and 14. And they're still very popular, still very highly anticipated. By the time this comes out, there'll be a news post on the front page about it. Version 79, which is updated with the bubble, with the NBA restart, very much anticipated. You've still got people and people looking forward, I hope, to my 2K11 rosters, and the people who enjoy 2K loves 2K11 rosters and things like that. And still people asking for 2K12. 2K12, unfortunately, has been kind of forgotten with that situation there. But there is still that interest in those older games, and 2K14 in particular has, I believe, still the most mods in our download section now, the most uploads and additions to the download section, and by a large margin, I believe. And we have lost some for the earlier games, of course, but it's still, I still think even taking that into consideration would have set the record, even, if those files were still there for those older games, because the 2K14 modding section has been going strong 4, 5, 6, 7 years after the game came out. We could be seeing a similar thing with 2K21 PC. It could be, and people have brought that up. You brought that up. It's very feasible, and especially if it is the more polished version, and if the next gen port needs a bit more grunt in your PC than some people have at the moment, people might not have been able to get the next gen version anyway. Who knows if it's optimized? So we've seen that before on PC. So there's a lot of variables here that while I understand the disappointment, as we've said before, there's definitely a silver lining, or potential silver lining.
If I love the game, I'll jump into modding, and I haven't gotten heavily into modding since 2K17.
Yeah,
and people are still asking for my 2K17 rosters. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, like you said, there's staying power, and people will play them. And I think that the biggest thing for a lot of people is they want the new game, right? And whether it's a last gen port or if it's the new gen, it's the newest game. And they can feel good and still say, hey, you know what? I'm playing NBA 2K21. I'm playing 2K21 just like you are, but look at what I have. Look at the scoreboards I have.
Yeah.
Look at the rosters I have. You don't have this version of Tracy McGrady. You don't have this Orlando Magic team. You don't have this Suns team, all of that stuff. So, no, I think that it could be a good play, and I think that it could help the modding community. As far as it also could help, promote modding even more, which has definitely gotten a lot more promotion over the last year or two. The demo gameplay, I'm expecting very much just what we've had in the past. The prelude or prelude or whatever, however you say it, and that, and then also the basic 2KU type gameplay. I wish they would allow us to play like 5-minute quarters of an exhibition game, which is what Live has allowed us to do in the past. But I'm more expecting just a glimpse into that online experience, and then also just like your regular 2KU gameplay.
You don't think there might not be some Kobe content, like if they've added if say they have added the 2009 or 2010 Lakers, that there might not be an exhibition game between them and maybe the Celtics, or maybe the 2008 Lakers and Celtics?
Now, if they did that, that would be cool as hell.
Yeah.
And it would make sense for the date, and I think that would be an amazing marketing move. I mean, can you see that, or do you think they're maybe just putting Kobe out there because of the 824 and maybe getting people excited about that demo, but then it's just going to be the prelude or a my player builder like it was last year, and that kind of thing. Like it wasn't, we didn't even get the prelude last year. It was just the create a player. I'm kind of like, again, this is another one of those toss-up things. I'm just going by what they've done history-wise. For the most part, like what they've given to us content-wise. I think it would be a smart move. It's a great marketing move, and it's something that I would do if I was, a suit for the company. I would push for that, but I'm 50-50 on it. I love the idea. I don't know.
That's a fair point, and it's entered my mind because it would make sense, would it not? But at the same time, yes, it would also make a lot of sense or be very likely if they did it the way they've done in the past. 2K's demos, for as great as 2K's games have been, the demos have been disappointing. There won't be a PC version. That's not unexpected. I don't think we've had I think 2K9 is the only, and that was the first year, of course, it was on PC. I think that's the only time we've got a PC demo. We haven't had one in the years since, or certain, because that was the one, again, it came through Steam, and I don't think we've had one since.
So wait, I didn't even catch that. Do we get a PC demo?
We don't.
Yeah, so we're not going to get one this year, yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of... so I was talking with somebody because they had asked me some questions. You had commented on it. I had dragged you into, you remember Adam Taylor's post who said he was looking at getting into PC gaming?
Oh, yeah.
So that little conversation I had, somebody reach out to me and he had made a comment. He goes, I've heard rumors that the PC doesn't get any of the patches or the same patches that the consoles get. And I was told that they have less content and all of that stuff. So I corrected a lot of that stuff. I don't think that the PC gets the shaft as far as patches or content goes, right? Like, if anything, because of mods, we just have so much more. Right.
Yeah, 13 and 14 we didn't get any official patches. That was the first time the PC version kind of got screwed over. And in fact, if you go back to 13, they, with the new jerseys they were pushing through and unlocking, they were unlocking them in the rosters, but not sending through the art. 2K14, they fixed that up by sending those through with the roster updates, with the what is it, the live folder, the roaming folder. Anyway, they sent through the actual art updates as well in 2K14. But in 13, if you go back and play with the official rosters and you don't have any third-party jersey mods there, you'll actually see they've got white textures because they've unlocked the jerseys in the roster, added them to the roster because it's the same as the 360 PS3 version, but they haven't added the art assets. They did fix that for 14, but we didn't get any of the bug fix patches. But since it went to Steam release only, and with 2K15 and the current gen port, we've got all the same patches except for the ones that are console specific. For some things like the 2K League and such, that they've added the combine and things like that. There's been a few console specific patches, but apart from that, we've got the same content, the same bug fixes usually as the console version. So it has improved in that regard. Yeah, but less
gameplay patches is a good thing in my opinion too.
Yeah.
I just want to point that out. So that's almost a plus if there's less gameplay patches, like you talked about 2K13 not getting the same patches. I don't know how many nerfs there were in that game, but the default gameplay of 2K13 is pretty damn good. So I'm glad that that experience wasn't altered. But agreed. As far as like the PC version goes, yeah, I don't understand why they don't give us a demo. It's not like they're incapable. I mean, I see Steam demos all the time.
Yeah, there's only one digital platform that comes out on PC. I mean, I could understand when they had a disc version and a Steam version and all kinds of stuff, but it's Steam exclusive now, so there's no reason they couldn't do it.
Yeah, and as far as NBA Live, as far as NBA Live goes, I wanted to bring up a point. I don't know if you saw this, but not only is Madden on Steam now, not just on Origin, but so is FIFA. And so is PGA Tour 2021. So really disappointing looking at the Steam store and seeing that you can pre-order these games, Madden 21, FIFA 21, PGA Tour 21, all of these EA Sports titles, and Live isn't even releasing a game.
Yeah.
They're not even released. That is so disappointing. I know that's kind of going a little bit off topic, but on the subject of Steam, they've moved on from just Origin, and now they're on Steam, and we can't even get an NBA Live release. And it's frustrating.
It is. And again, as we talked about before, it's the competition that was why we want it to be a thing, and we're just simply not getting it. You brought up the idea of... or the idea came up as we were talking before the show about a next-gen demo, and you brought up the idea that it's probably not going to happen, and I hadn't really given much thought to it. But with it being a launch title, there was no demo for 2K14 back in the day. I don't think we actually got one until we got the prelude for 2K17, if I'm recalling correctly. We probably won't get that next-gen demo. They're just going to push that through as a launch title.
Yeah, and that's also frustrating, and I get it. You know what I mean? I get the marketing angle on that and whatnot. But in reality, I'm sure they don't want people to go onto the marketplace, download the free demo, be like, hey, you know what, I like the PS4 version better, or this isn't what I was looking for, and then not buy the game. They want people to buy the game at full price and whatnot. So again, from a marketing perspective, like I understand from a business marketing perspective what they're doing, but it kind of stinks for gamers.
It's funny because in one hand, it's been great what NBA Live has done with the demo, and I think NBA Live has needed to put the demo out to get people at least talking about the game and maybe thinking that it's worth picking up the full version. And I think they've done a good job of being able to have a bit of depth to their demos on this generation, and have people have that progress carry over to the full version. But you see what happened, of course, with NBA Elite 11's demo, and it's kind of shown that if you have a bad demonstration, how much you can actually hurt the full version. I mean, NBA Elite 11 was probably going to be a disaster either way, and we've talked about that, and probably we'll touch on it again, how it was the wrong decision as opposed to building on what NBA Live 10 did. But imagine if they didn't release that demo and the game just came out as it was, and people just trusted it because they've played NBA Live for years, and okay, we'll give NBA Elite 11 a chance and whatever. It's the rebuild. They probably would have sold enough copies to at least have to make a bit of a dent in 2K's sales and not have 2K go unopposed. If you have a bad demonstration, and maybe I'm not going to suggest that 2K's demo is going to be in such rough shape as Elite 11 was, even on the next gen. But again, as you say, if you make that bad demonstration, and Elite 11 is perhaps the most triumphant example now in basketball gaming, then people may be turned off.
Well, not only that, I mean, it happened to Live 18.
Yeah.
Live 18's demo got received incredibly poor. Go and take a look at some of the videos that were put up on YouTube and look at the commentary behind them. And people not even, just straight gameplay. People not giving commentary, not crapping on the game and everything. People were still upset with the animations, the way they looked, the shots on the move, how they looked clunky and robotic, and, some of the animations and all of that stuff. And people weren't thrilled with the graphics and everything. Like, that Live 18 demo hurt Live 18 sales. And that's what I mean by I get the business and marketing side of it. But at the same time, I feel like, for the amount people spend on these games, I feel like they should, and especially with the technology in place that allows us to, I feel like they should have a demo, something that can help them make the decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, make a responsible, educated buying decision. And I think a demo I think it should be, in my opinion, it should be standard. That's just my opinion, though.
Well, you and I grew up in a time when demos were far more frequent. You would get demo CDs or demo floppy disks way back in the day. You would have shareware where you could play maybe the first episode of an episodic game for free. They've done some things like that digitally as well. I know with some Telltale's games, they've released an episode or one or two episodes for free of various games. So they have done that, but it has really gone away from that you really have to commit with gaming these days.
As a consumer, how many times have you bought a game in your lifetime that you regretted? Think about it. Like, if you go back and, like, let's talk about basketball games. How many times have you? Quite a few, right?
For basketball games? I mean...
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, well, I made that joke off air after we finished recording after Live 14 came out, when that was new. John Ming asked me, had I enjoyed the game at all, because I was quite negative on that podcast, if you go back and listen to that post-release. And I said, yeah, when I ejected the disc, I felt pretty good, because I really did not like 14 when I got it. And I was not alone on that point, obviously. Again, because I'm a collector, I kind of commit myself to getting the games no matter what, at least on one platform a year. So it's one of those things where, yeah. But there have definitely been games that I have bought that I've been, basketball or otherwise, that I've been quite disappointed with.
Yeah, same here. I mean, there definitely has been. I mean, we're collectors, so we like to keep the basketball titles anyway, but there's definitely some where if I wasn't in a financial situation that I'm in right now, where I'd love to be able to just try it, before putting the money down on it, if I wasn't a collector. So yeah, I don't know. I do think that you and I, if you went back and in time and we bought NBA Showdown in 1993 or 1994 or whatnot, and we bought that, we were stuck with it, right?
Yeah.
You had to buy it in order to play the game. So
you could rent it, I suppose. You could, you know, that's the thing. That was the other thing we had. We could rent the full version.
Renting wasn't, if it was available.
Yeah, true.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the place that was nearby to me didn't have the greatest selection, to be completely honest with you, the one that I could ride my bike to. But yeah, I think that, you know, we may be a little bit more tolerant, and also a little bit more aware because of, you know, the way we grew up and, you know, what we had to deal with. But at the same time, I think that the technology serves right in this day and age to be able to supply people demos on all different platforms.
Yeah, but again, you look at some of the things they've done with demos in recent years in the Prelude, where they've juiced the abilities, so people go into the full game thinking, oh, we're actually going to be able to be okay coming out of the gate, but then you're a 60 overall and it's really terrible in my play in my career, because then you've got to force the upgrades. You look at what happened with the Prelude in 2K18. Both the Prelude, both when you play it in the full version and in the demo version, it doesn't have all the haircuts because they were hiding the fact that you were going to have to pay for them with VC. Whereas before you could just change your look at any time. Now you have to go to the barber and pay for it. They were hiding that. You remember, if you play the 2K17 Prelude, you were able to actually spend money in the Prelude to upgrade your player. They changed the pricing in 2K18, so you weren't able to upgrade until you got to the full version. So there's little things they do in the demo as well that aren't always honest, things that are misleading, and they kind of fly under the radar, especially the juiced abilities, to make people think that the what's in the demo doesn't feel, it's not reflective, of the indicative, I should say, of the final product. So even then, when we do get demos, sometimes we're misled anyway. So that's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's just because it's limited too. I mean, the thing is that if you remember correctly, with 2K18, you were allowed to scrimmage, right?
Yeah.
But that's not full 5-on-5 gameplay. You were only allowed to use 2 teams. You were only allowed to play on 1 difficulty level and all of that stuff. That's not a true representation of what you're getting into.
And you know what I mean? Getting interrupted every so often by the pop-up as well. It wasn't a full experience.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that a demo needs to be done right. I will say, even though that Live 18's demo didn't do a good job of getting people on board because it wasn't that sound gameplay-wise, I will say that at least you had real NBA teams at a real NBA atmosphere on the floor.
It was honest, so I suppose.
Yeah, it was a little bit more. It was definitely a little bit more honest.
For better or worse. And of course, they actually did upgrade that with some gameplay patches and added a couple more teams to it. So they were even updating the demo, which, I mean, Live has to do these things. Live is trying to win back the audience by doing some things that we don't think are going to win back the audience, admittedly. But they have been trying. 2K is in a position where they don't really have to try. And so that's why we get some of the demos and things that we do, because... And especially now, with Live being really in limbo, they're in a very safe position.
Yeah, exactly. 2K can get away with murder right now, really, because people are going to buy a basketball game and they know it. So they can basically do what they want. And hopefully someday that will change. Listen, I'm going to be very upset if we go an entire PS5 cycle, like this whole cycle of these new consoles and whatnot, and this new technology, and not one other player comes into the space.
Yeah.
Like, that would be absolutely insane, in my opinion. And I don't think it's going to happen, but, there is an outside chance that happens, and that would be terrible for the basketball gaming scene.
I was going to say, what do you think is, what are the chances of that? I think there's an outside chance because of the way how Live has just become so irrelevant, but at the same time, they've still got the license. They're still doing NBA Live Mobile. They've been working on things for NBA Live. They keep pushing it back because they don't feel it's the quality is there. But yeah, it would just be a disaster. And people say, oh well, just let it die. And like, well, we've seen what happens when 2K is unopposed in the space. Do you want that? And if you're so anti EA for whatever reason, and there are reasons that one might be, so I'm not going to say you have no reason to be, but if you're anti EA, certainly you shouldn't be anti somebody else coming into the space.
Yeah, exactly. I think the problem that I have with that is it's very ignorant. It's not thinking big picture. It's not expanding outside of the bounds of your selfish mindset. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think if my biggest problem with it is you should want competition in the space. You should want more options, more competition and more options. There's no negative for that, right? That's only a positive. That can only be looked at as positive. You can hate EA, you can hate another company or whatnot, but having more options in the space will always be good. It makes the competitor up their game and have to maybe even be more innovative and make games more for the gamer, maybe cut down on the microtransaction stuff, all of that stuff. So I think that it's very close-minded to say something like, well, F2K or FEA or F this or, PlayStation, all of this stuff. I say PlayStation because I meant Sony, from the old 989 games and whatnot. I think it's very selfish, very close-minded to have that attitude.
I mean, the thing is, even if somebody doesn't want us to support EA and buy NBA Live because they've been burned so many times, very understandable, obviously, but other people will give it a chance. And even if somebody doesn't personally, if they just want to stick with 2K, simply having that competition there is going to keep 2K honest to some extent if that competition can succeed. So even if you don't want to play NBA Live, you want it to at least be it or another title. And EA is probably going to be the only one, realistically, who's really going to be jumping into the space. So it's kind of what if we're going to have competition, it's going to be NBA Live, basically. They're the only ones who are kind of throwing their hat into the ring in the last decade to do it, apart from, I guess, NBA Baller Beats and some other mobile games. That's not a mobile game, but other games, here and there. NBA Playgrounds, of course, but it's not. It's an arcade game, a full-on jam style, street style arcade game. Realistically, NBA Live is going to be the only competitor that can be competition. So even if you're going to stick with 2K, you should at least want there to be the competition, so that 2K has to stay honest, that they can't just run roughshod over the consumer as they have been. And we've seen the pushback when they went trying to go a bit too far with 2K18, but they've sort of brought it back a little more subtly and doing things. So it's one of those things where, as we said before, you do need to have that competition.
Yeah, and I hope always in the back of my mind that some company out there is working on a basketball game, but they're like they've been secretly working on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like developing it, and then we're going to get this grand announcement of, oh look, NBA Hoops 2021 or something.
It'd be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would love to see something like that, but unfortunately, like you said, if there is a player in the space, it's probably going to end up being NBA Live because they have the structure.
Yeah,
something like the structure. Yeah, someone. They do have the bones in place in order to make a stab at it.
And it's unfortunate. You go back to the games we've talked about growing up with multiple series, and I've been collecting again recently with picking up some deals. I've been letting you know about some of the games I've got. My copy of College Hoops 2K8 actually came in today, so that was nice. 2K7 is hopefully going to be arriving next week based on the email notification that I got this evening, or yesterday rather. So that'll be nice. There's some other ones that I've been getting. I got NBA In the Zone 2 arrived. I was playing that. That's based in the 97 season. That is the one that has M Guard on the Bulls. That is basically Michael Jordan. It's why future Konami games in that series, in the Zone 98 or NBA Pro 98 as it was in Australia, had to make Jordan a generic white guy because they basically used a very Jordan-like face on number 83 M Guard.
That is Jordan's face.
Yeah,
is Jordan's face.
Like maybe you can say the expression's a little leads to some ambiguity, but yeah, they really pushed the limit on that one and got in trouble for it. I mentioned that in the Friday 5 a couple of weeks back as well. So I was playing a game with that, Bulls versus Sonics NBA Finals rematch, and so I'm playing there with Michael Jordan. Excuse me, M Guard. And so anyway, Jordan had the last shot to force overtime. Got fouled on it. I hit the free throws and actually made the steal with 3 seconds left and had a chance to win the game in regulation, but missed and went into overtime, and I won in the overtime. And it was a really fun game, and it goes back to something we've talked about before, the simplicity of those older games, but also the difference they had. Because I wouldn't say it's on par with Live 97 in many respects, but there was something about it that it's certainly fun, and it's different, and they were all doing something a little bit different at the time when we had those multiple games, and it's why there is so much value in them. And it was quite fun because I didn't play that the first time around, so this is my first time really playing in the Zone 2. And I'm quite enjoying playing some of these old games, and that's why I've been picking them up recently. Yes, I'm going to be doing content on them, way back Wednesday articles and so forth, and maybe a few videos as well. But simply for my own enjoyment, playing some games that I didn't the first time around because I was so focused on live and seeing what they had to offer. Again, it's fun to do, and it's fun to try something else. But it does also reiterate to me how important it was to have that competition.
Yeah, so I played a couple full seasons when I was younger on NBA in the Zone 2, and it's unique. It has a unique feel. Its feel can't even get close to, they're representing the same sport, but the game is an entirely different, 100% different feel from NBA Live 97. NBA in the Zone 2 is just a completely different type of experience between the dribbling mechanics, the way the players move, how the shots feel, the way the graphics look, the menus, it's just a completely different experience. And to be honest with you, I think overall I enjoy NBA in the Zone 2 a little bit more than Live 97 between the lines, even though Live 97 was great for its time. But that's the whole point about having options, right?
For sure.
If I didn't want to pop in NBA Live 97, I'm popping in NBA in the Zone 2, or vice versa. So it gave us... or Shootout 97, or all the different basketball titles that came out at the time. So I really enjoy that game. I like that you like it. It definitely has a unique atmosphere. It's very 90s.
Oh, yeah.
The gameplay...
As was 97, yeah. They really ramped up the 90s style with the presentation that year, both games.
Yeah. And so, it's cool to hear that you had fun with that game because I definitely like it. I love the shooting. I love the way the dunks look. I love the shooting mechanics, etc. I like the feeling of getting a steal, etc. Getting a block. There's some cool looking blocks that you can get in that game.
Well, it was coming from NBA Give and Go. It's kind of a continuation of that series. So you've got some of the remnants of the really big jumping and the slow motion dunks from that series, I feel.
Oh, yeah, you definitely do. And I also want to point out that the NBA in the Zone original, which is the most 90s game I think I've ever played, for basketball. And the original NBA in the Zone is also solid. So, again, it's just nice seeing. It was nice seeing back then all the different options that we had.
So I wanted to mention some of the games that I will be probably mentioning in Way Back Wednesday over the coming weeks and months. I'm just going to go down my purchase history in my eBay and I've got some pretty good deals on these. I didn't break the bank at all, so it was quite nice. I picked up Kids Sport Basketball for PS2, which is one it's obviously very kiddie, but I'm kind of interested to see. It's just, this is a fun thing because again, that's the kind of thing you don't really see as much of these days. These spin-off games and cartoony games, as we talked about the other week.
Yeah, exactly. And I've never played that game, but there's definitely a place for that. And I want people to think about it this way. Playgrounds too, yeah, sure, it has like regular, real NBA players and representation for jerseys and everything, but that game in no way resembles real basketball.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So now just replace those players with Looney Tunes characters or made-up characters and all of that stuff and put that type of gameplay in it. And you can still have a fun gameplay experience. So think about it that way. There's definitely a place for games like that in Looney Tunes B-Ball and all those other games.
I'm interested to see how it pans out. Another one is a DOS version of Street Sports Jam It. Have you heard of that one?
I have heard of it. I haven't played it, but I have heard of it.
So I got that one to see how that goes. That's a DOS one, so I'll just be able to whack that into DOSBox and play that on a modern PC very easily. Going back to PS2, the And1 Street Ball for PS2 and Street Hoops, a couple of, again, competitors to the NBA Street Series. And, so that'll be interesting as well. And, of course, the And1, because that was very big at the time. I haven't played those at the time, so I'm looking forward to getting my hands on them.
My memory of those is that they're not very fun.
All right.
And they're not...
now you're
talking. And they're not very deep. I'm pretty sure that you can use... what was his name? The helicopter or something in the, what was his name in the And1 Street Tour?
The Air Up There?
Yeah, I can't remember what his name is. You can use like real and one characters and everything, but the gameplay and the depth it's just something that doesn't line up with the other games, and I just wasn't really a big fan of it.
So I'm not expecting them because I mean, it's fun to just check them out. Look, the same reason I mentioned before why I got the much maligned Fallout Brotherhood of Steel for PS2. It's more about the seeing what it's like, and just if you can pick it up cheaply. I wouldn't spend, they were quite cheap, so I wouldn't be spending a lot of money on them. Certainly not NBA League 11 prices or something like that. So it's one of those things.
Escalade. Sorry, I was thinking of Escalade, not Helicopter. I think his name is Escalade.
Right, anyway, right. Yeah, that reminds me. That does sound familiar. Yeah. So it's more a case of checking them out as a point of interest, and of course doing a way back Wednesday on them, because it is important again to see when there were so many games in the basketball gaming space for both arcade and sim. So it'll be worth looking back for it on that respect. Two other games I got. So of course I've mentioned World League Basketball, which is the PAL version of the NCAA Basketball by HAL software that you played. I both got the US version of that because I got an adapter for my Super Nintendo, a converter, so I can play NTSC games. So I got that, and also the Japanese version, Super Dunk Shot. So that will be that will be very interesting to play on the original hardware as well. That's the one, of course, with the fake. The Super Dunk Shot is the one with the fake NBA, essentially, with the your beloved Boston Celeries, and my beloved Chicago Bills with Michael Jordan. Or Jordan, I forget which one was which. Scottie Pippen. Again, would not happen these days. With it's way too close to being a licensed game. I don't know how they got away with it then, but certainly they wouldn't get away with it now. So I got those as well. I got Hoops for the NES and Double Dribble as well also for NES. A couple of PlayStation 1 versions of Live 2003 and 2002, just to compare them to the PS2 versions. Got them nice and cheap. Space Jam for the PlayStation, and of course NBA Showdown for the Super Nintendo, which is the reason I got the converter to play the NTSC cartridge, because it didn't come out in the PAL regions. I have played it before, but I'll be able to play it on original hardware now, along with the universal adapter. Also got a spare version of a 2K10 for PC, because my disc is a bit scratched up and sometimes doesn't read, so I got a cheap backup version of that. As I say, College Hoops 2K7 is on its way, and I've also got a copy of another copy of ESPN NBA Tonight 2002, which will hopefully work. The last one didn't, so that will be a replacement for that one. So I've got a fair few games coming, and a fair few things to talk about on the podcast and for Way Back Wednesday. Some games are going to be good, some of them I know are going to be kind of bad, but it's all fun to check out for the first time in many cases, and to do that content on them. So I'm looking forward to it, Derek.
Well, a couple quick things. NCAA basketball for Super Nintendo is one of my favorite basketball games of all time.
It's great. I mean, I've only played the PAL version of it.
Great,
yeah. Same game.
It's a great game.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great game. The graphics, in my opinion, definitely were good for its time. No, you didn't have a crowd. It was just this blue area outside the court. But the camera view was unique. You still had to use strategy. It was a different type of experience. I love that game. But I did have a question for you. Do you have Double Dribble Playoff Edition for Sega Genesis?
No, I don't have a Sega Genesis. Or Mega Drive as it is in Australia.
Oh, we talked about this. Yeah, so you that's a game that's a must. You got to pick that up. It's not a very good game. The gameplay is just not very good. But they kind of skirted around the licensing thing, and I talked about that on the past podcast and everything. But it's the sequel to that NES Double Dribble game, and I feel like it's a must for a collector.
Is that the one with, like, it's got Larry Birdie and things like that, or Larry Fowl, or all these punny names?
No, that's not the one. This one has, like, for the Chicago, I want to say they said Chicago Stags, which we talked about is kind of ironic that they use that.
Yeah.
I want to say it's Chicago Stags, it's Chicago something, but it's not the Bulls. But they have all the Bulls colors and all of that stuff, and their power forward is just some random name, but he has goggles like Horace Grant, and their shooting guard is named Pete Pavich, but he looks like Michael Jordan. He's black, he's bald, and he's like, I think he's the same height.
He's the M guard of his era, basically.
Right, exactly. And the small forward has Scottie Pippen's haircut, and everything. So like they skirted the lines and did it as much as they could.
And they could do it back in the day. Like a lot of, again, Super Dunk Shot did it. They have changed some of the appearances around, but they really did push the limits of what they could do, which I don't think they would do these days, especially in the wake of things like the Ed O'Bannon lawsuit.
Right, and then actually for the for that version, I may send you some screenshots so just so you can kind of see how funny it is. They also have things like R Plant, like J Page, like Robert Plant, Jimmy Page. Like I don't know if they ran out of names ideas or thought they were going to be funny. But they put like, I think there's like a guy on G Washington and all of this stuff. They're definitely, they did some things like that to try to kind of have fun with it. But then they also tried to like make it kind of an NBA experience. But the gameplay is pretty poor overall, but I think it's like a must-have for a collector.
I just remembered Live 06 for the PS2, only again in the NTSC region, had an embedded version of NBA Live 95, emulated Genesis version of Live 95 in the PS2 version of NBA Live 06, kind of like the 10th anniversary kind of thing. But because a lot of the players were no longer in the NBA and were no longer licensed, they basically replaced all the players with generic ones, including ones, funnily enough, like Shaq, who was still in the league. So that you go into it and they've got a lot of punny names. I think like the starting center for the Magic or possibly the Knicks, instead of Ewing or Shaq, whichever one it was, is called Just in Time and things like that. So even as late as like 06, when they had to re-release that version of 95 embedded as a bonus on the 06 disc, you had to they had to change all the names. So they just went with really punny ones.
Yeah, I think it's cool that they kind of have fun with it. And I mean, if you're not using the real player anyway, it's probably fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really ruin the experience too much. But again, add that to your collection if you can. There's another NCAA basketball game that came out for Sega. I'm not sure. I don't think it came out for Super Nintendo, and I can't remember the creator of it. It's something like Bitmasters or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it was an NCAA basketball game that had all this different like smooth movement and all of that stuff. It wasn't the greatest game. I want to say it's either called NCAA Basketball or NCAA Final Four. But you should probably check that one out too. It's a game I grew up with.
One that I did pass on because I looked around. I only went for them if they were cheap. It was the only one I could find was in the US, and the postage was a bit much for me to want to pay for it. Knowing what it is Nicktoons Basketball with the cast of Rugrats all grown up as some of the playable characters. So I mean, again, there's all kinds of crazy spin-off games from back in the day.
Yeah, I never played that game. It's surprising.
Yeah,
the Nicktoons one.
I haven't, and as I said, I thought about it, but I looked at the what it was selling for and what the it's a PC one as well, so I would have been able to get it to work in emulators and virtual machines and whatnot. If in DOSBox, if nothing else, I suppose. But yeah, it was a bit too expensive with the shipping, so I passed on it on this occasion. Don't want to spend too much at any one time, but I found some good bargains on this occasion. So it's again a lot of ones to check out, and the ones that I've got coming over the next few weeks, hopefully, will be some interesting ones to check out for Wayback Wednesday, and probably talk about it on the podcast as well, because it's just to pop them in and just see what they're like. I mean, it's going back to Fox Sports NBA Basketball 2000. That is not a good game. It's hilariously bad in some respects, but it was kind of entertaining at the same time, kind of funny.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool if you ever get around to it. I know you're super busy, but if you uploaded some gameplay videos, found some way to do that, that would be cool. I know it's tough sometimes when you're using the original hardware and you don't have an emulator or whatnot, but we do have emulators that basically you can, if you own the physical copy, you can get an emulator for pretty much anything.
Yeah.
So I think it would be pretty cool if you uploaded that to the NLSC YouTube channel. I know I would check them out.
Yeah,
I know.
I do want to do some more videos like that. I mean, I don't like to do the unscripted ones, as you know, but no, I would like to do some. Yeah.
As I pressure you publicly on the podcast.
No, I mean it is one of those things. I do have the Elgato, and of course I've got capture software on the PC if I am using the emulators, and sometimes that is the best way to get a high quality screenshot of these old games is to use the emulated version. And like you say, it is legal if you have that original copy. So it's, in fact, that's the only way that I've been able to play the Japanese version of Live 2002 that I have, is to pop that in the emulator. That's how I got the the screenshots. Otherwise, it wouldn't work on my PS2. But I do have the Elgato. I do have the other capture software, Bandicam, which is currently what I'm using on PC. So I do have the. It's just a matter of like you say, putting aside the time to just capture some raw footage of me playing a game. But if people are interested in seeing me do that, then it's. I do have a pretty big collection, Derek, to choose from. So maybe I can have some kind of retro gaming sessions, and if not stream it, then certainly capture the footage and chuck it up there, because it's, if people are interested, because it's and they are interesting games in their own right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I want to expand my collection. I have a lot right now, but I'm just so focused on some other stuff that I'm going to put it on the back burner. I have plenty to play, though. Let's not get twisted. Talked about it before. I have so many different games that I can play, but I do plan on expanding my collection at some point soon.
Like we said before, it's fun to just if you come across a bargain as well, and if it's something you've enjoyed before but let go, or if it's something that you've never played before, I can put things in perspective. If they came out in late 90s, early 2000s, I know what they're basically going to be, and I know some are better and worse than others, but it's all part of the fun. I mean, even going back and playing something horrible like Bill Lambire's Combat Basketball, it's still interesting to experience and just to be able to see and to have glance back and at the dark ages of basketball gaming, and that one's barely a basketball game as it is. It's almost more like a soccer game in the way the mechanics work. But it's fun to go back and look at that, and certainly, in some ways it can also make you appreciate some of the newer games and see just how far they've come.
Bill Lambire's Combat Basketball is a case of throwing crap against the wall and hoping it sticks. That's basically what that was. It's not a very good basketball game at all. It barely resembles basketball, but it has Bill Lambire's name attached to it.
Yeah.
And it has like power-ups and all of this stuff. It's a very strange game, but it's an example of something that was happening a lot more at the time. Is there were companies that were trying to get into the space using real players sometimes as a front and all of that stuff, and
very much
kind of and then just kind of throwing crap against the wall and hoping that maybe it catches on.
And to be fair, a lot of it didn't, because like you say, it wasn't a very good representation of basketball. I actually have done a Way Back Wednesday on that one, so you can go back and check that out in the archives. But yeah, that's what I've been doing as I've been waiting for, and of course playing a bit of 2K20 as well as we wait for 2K21 to come out. And with the demo coming, I suppose that will be something in the next couple of weeks that as that comes out, that we'll have some in-depth impressions of.
We'll have plenty to talk about.
Always.
I mean, I think the hardest thing is having a show that isn't too long. You know what I mean? Because like we've talked about before, and we talk off air, we could talk about this for a long time.
Indeed. So. And once again, we have, but kind of have reached the end of this week's show. Breaking down the gameplay blog there, and hopefully we get some more gameplay blogs or developer blogs rather next week, Derek, and have some more to talk about. But they are running out of time, and Brian Mazik, who is very much into franchise gaming, of course, put out his article. Where is the franchise blog, and it makes me wonder if we'll hear anything, because if they are doing anything with that, it's probably going into next gen. I mean, I'm not expecting a huge revamp of modes, especially outside of my career this year.
Me neither. I've said that before. I mean, you're going to get more depth in the ways that they've already hinted at it, and whatnot. Female creative player feature for my career, maybe even offline. Possibly a few new classic teams and stuff. And you know what? The game was already fine depth-wise for the most part. That's not something that I'm worried about. I'm more worried about the between the lines gameplay. Yeah,
and it's a shame that some of the things won't be enhanced, but that maybe will be happening in next gen. But we do have to temper our expectations for current gen, from gameplay to game modes, and of course content as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I do, and I am gonna. I'm upset about some of the new announcements. As far as I'm incredibly cautious about the right stick stuff and everything, but at the same time, I'm trying to remain optimistic. And you and I have talked about this. We have such a big collection. There's other games we can play, so that's a bonus.
Oh yeah. Absolutely, basketball or otherwise, but certainly plenty of virtual hoops to get on with. But with that being said, we turn the discussion over to our faithful listeners. What do you think about the developer blog that came out, the gameplay enhancements, the changes? Let us know what you think in the comment section on the news post, and of course in the forum, or indeed in social media. Let us know in any of those avenues what you think, and everything else that we talked about this week. Been getting a few more comments as of late, Derek, and once again, as we said last week, very nice to see, and we encourage it. Might have to get that mailbag section going, though.
Yeah, I think it just encourages a little bit more participation. I think we have a lot of people listening to the show, and we do have people commenting on it, and I really appreciate it. I think Dualcaster on Twitter is one who's really appreciated it recently, and
yep,
he's like, hey, these guys are pretty good. So shout out to him. I think that we do, a damn good job of covering basketball history and the current basketball, retro gaming, but also the current news and topics and whatnot centered around basketball gaming. And I really hope that more people start commenting.
Absolutely. So let us know. The podcast, of course, comes out Sunday wherever you are in the world, I believe. You can catch that on the NLSC, of course, which is nba-live.com. We're also on various podcatching apps and platforms, including Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, to name some of the big ones. Search for the NLSC podcast, look for our logo, and that will be us. Once again, if you feel inclined to leave us a review on those platforms, we certainly welcome that, especially if it is a positive one. Helps with visibility, helps with our ego, and so definitely feel free to leave us a review there. Before I read off our various socials, Derek, of course, I'm on Twitter at AndrewNLSC. Where can we find you?
So my podcast, Holding Court with D4 got pushed back another week, and the reason is because I needed my regular, 9 to 5, 40-hour week job. I needed them to get back to me on a possible, relationship with a media entity and to give me the okay. So we had to push this back one more week. So the goal is to have the podcast released episode 1 next Saturday. Andrew will be my guest on the show. Fitting, if I do say so myself.
Yeah. Convenient.
And so that, what was that?
Convenient. Easy.
Yeah, very convenient. Easy, yeah, definitely easy to settle into that. So if you like this podcast, tune into that one, basically, as we'll be covering Real Hoop as well. So that's going to be on August 22nd, so stay tuned for that. I'll send out updates on my Twitter handle. My Twitter is at D4384. I'm over on the NLSC, D43, and I'm on Twitter, on YouTube, D43 as well.
Fantastic. And I don't want to give away too much of what we're going to be talking about, but we will be looking back at an old game. And yes, as I said before, not only am I going to watch it on YouTube, but I do want to get my VCR out, and because I do have it on VHS, that particular game, and watch it old school. I think that'll be quite fun to do.
I've watched it 3 times over the last week and a half, which is crazy. The whole thing is on YouTube, including the full presentation with NBC and all of that stuff. Of course, you'll get to see that when you pull out the old VHS and whatnot. But I just want to point something out. It's a great game. It's definitely one that we will be able to expand on at length. So definitely good times.
Stay tuned for that. And of course, the NLSC is on Facebook and Twitter at the NLSC. On Instagram, we are NLSC Basketball. Our YouTube is NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, which is nba-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. But yes, that is all for this week. Thank you once again for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Andrew.
I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.